Hello, my name's Dr. Padilla. I'm a professor in computer science and psychology, and I've been a professor for over 5 years now. Today, I wanted to talk about a topic that might be affecting you, and that's how to navigate the emotional roller coaster of a PhD. As you probably know, or might have heard online, PhD can be a very emotional time. There's lots of rejections, there's lots of stress that happens. How do you deal with that and make a long-term sustainable career? I'm going to give you some of my advice that has worked for me, but I've also heard work from my colleagues as well. So let's jump on in. But first of all, I want to say that academia can be very fun and enjoyable. And there's kind of an allure of academia, right? It's this time where you get to expand and grow. You get to deepen your understanding of a particular topic, become an expert. All of that is fun and exciting, and it absolutely is. But there's also a negative part of academia, which is that it's also very stressful and very challenging. And there are some unique stressors to academia that you're not going to find in other jobs. So I wanted to talk about some of those and ways to kind of manage this kind of roller coaster of emotions that happens across your PhD. There are two categories of stressors that you will find in your PhD. One is the academic stressors, and the other are the personal stressors. So I'll break down each that I've identified and some of the tips and tricks I've learned to reduce some of those stress within that particular category. The first and most obvious is research. Research is tricky because it comes with big highs and big lows. In particular, the lows are the rejections, right? How do you deal with those rejections? I've talked about this in past videos, but I think a major thing to do when you are submitting your work, what happens is you submit it to a peer review and people will evaluate it and they'll either accept it or reject it, and you'll get many rejections. So you should come to this thinking that rejections are the norm. By and large, every 4 papers you submit, 1 might get accepted. So you need to be in the department of getting rejections, okay? And the more you submit, the more you get in. So you need to not be discouraged by rejections. But that can be hard, right? It's very emotional. I still get emotional every time I get a rejection. So one of the things I do is I celebrate the submissions. As soon as you submit something, celebrate that. Don't wait until it gets accepted. Celebrate every single time that you submit in whatever way you like to celebrate. I personally have a ritual every time I submit something. I do this special activity for myself, and that makes it really fun, and I look forward to submitting the work. Another thing that's worked really well for me is to have a failures list. In the past, I made a fridge failures list, and once I met 30 fridge failures, my husband and I went on a big trip. We've actually already reached 30 failures, so we have started the list again. I think we're at about 5. We collect a ton of failures on that list, and something in my mind switches when I get a failure and I add it to the list. It doesn't feel as bad as just letting it ruminate. And eventually I'll have enough of those failures to take a major trip. Once we make it to 30, we have a big trip. So it's as if I'm building to something with every failure rather than it just being like another, useless, wasted effort activity. I think when those rejections come in, you want to not internalize them as rejecting you. You are not your research. You are an independent person with a long history of things that you've done, other important, valuable contributions to the world. Your research isn't you. If your work gets rejected, you are not getting rejected. Just this thing that you made is getting rejected. So try to separate yourself from the work. I know that can be hard, but do your best to try to switch the mind frame. Not that you got rejected, but this draft was rejected. And if it's rejected, it gives you an opportunity to make it better. I am here to tell you, after many years in this field, having a poor quality paper that gets accepted is worse than getting it rejected a few times and then making it better and then having an excellent paper after that revision cycle. The next thing you're going to find within research that is a major stressor is deadline management. You are going to have deadlines come up, and I see this consistently for all of my students is they go on this deadline roller coaster where they're leaving things to the last minute, or maybe they're actually getting very stressed, but they're not kind of building up to the submission. And a few weeks before, they freak out and they do all of this work and they're just kind of going crazy trying to make it to these deadlines. That is, I think, the number one cause of stress I see for PhD students. What I encourage you to do is to ignore the deadline, or make the deadline 2 weeks before the actual deadline. Just put it in your head, put it on the calendar that a final draft needs to be ready 2 weeks before the deadline, and tell all of your collaborators that as well. Because it's not just you working to the deadline, it's your advisors, the other people on the paper, etc. If you say, hey, this draft is due 2 weeks before, then all of the stressing happens in advance and over a longer period of time. You do not want to pack it in. And it can be very seductive because if you're on the same submission cycle as other people, you'll find that everyone is kind of freaking out at the same time. So it's like everybody gets all worked up together. Do not do this. It will lead to low quality work. You will find that you are just on this constant roller coaster of these huge highs and huge lows. And it's much more healthy to have a very consistent trajectory of your work. So the ticket is to do things early, do things often. If you have a deadline 9 months from now, start it now. Why not? Why wait? But it can be really tricky to do that. So my advice is to use calendar feature and whatever type of calendar app you have, and put the deadline 2 weeks before, and then have manageable chunks from your time now to when the deadline is on the calendar. So each 2-week interval, you have a submission element ready. You have some package of the work that you've completed all the way up, and then at the deadline, everything will be ready to go. No need to freak out. Now, in order to pull this off, you have to manage your collaborators. And I think this can be really stressful for people because they don't want to feel like they're overstepping. I am here to tell you, people love to be managed because everyone has trouble with deadlines. Everyone has trouble with all this stuff. So if you're someone that says to even professors, like, here's when this part's gonna be due, and then this part, and then this part, they will love that. I'm telling you, they will love that, okay? Especially if you can get the group kind of meeting those particular deadlines. So don't feel afraid to manage all of the people, all of the collaborators on a particular project, even if it's not your role, just to kind of get everybody kind of working together on the same deadline. So that's some of the research aspects of stress that will come into your life. There's a few other things in terms of academia rather than personal life that will add stress. The next one is your advisor. Okay, your advisor relationship is really key. If that doesn't go well, it will be incredibly stressful and emotional for you. Even if it goes well, it will be emotional for you. I remember in my PhD, if I ever read an email from my advisor in a negative tone, it would emotionally affect me because I so deeply cared about what she thought about me and the work that I was doing. So even when it was going well, it was still an emotional process. So I think the major thing that you want to do with your advisor is to learn yourself. So that takes some self-work, and ask for what you need. What can happen in an advisor-advisee relationship is the advisor wants you to do well, right? They're paying you many times from their grants, and so they want you to be effective. But it's pretty hard to meet someone and just understand how to be a perfect advisor for them. So if you know what you need and you can tell them, it will make things so much easier. Maybe you're someone who needs hard deadlines that are not fudgeable. Tell your advisor that. Say, I work better when I have hard deadlines, and they will say, like, okay, here's some deadlines. Or maybe you need more frequent communication, or maybe you need longer periods of time to think on your own. You need to learn yourself and ask for what you need. That will help the advisor advise you because they just simply do not know what's going on in your head, and it will be hard for them to guess. And they might, A, not have the energy to guess. Maybe they're not someone who's as invested in the mentorship process, or B, they might want to do it, but it's really hard to get enough information to understand what people need to be successful. Now, on the flip side of that relationship, you want to learn the things that are core to your advisor. What are the things that they find important, their core values, and you want to align what you do with those. So that might be something where, they have this nature of work that they like to do. It's important for work for them to be done in a certain way. Figure out what that is and try to customize what you're doing for that. You don't have to be, a perfect student for that advisor, but find the core things that are really important to them and play to those desires. Because what you'll find is if they like working with you, they're going to work with you more and you'll have an overall better experience. So try to really invest some time and energy into that relationship. The last major stressor that I'll talk about in academia are your colleagues. These are other students in your program, maybe students in your lab. And I think a lot of people get lots of stress from just interpersonal relationships in their university and in their lab. So what I would say to you is that not every relationship is important. That might be a controversial take, but not every one of these relationships are going to follow you throughout your life. Only a small minority of people that you are connecting with are ultimately going to be with you in your future career. So I would encourage you to consider focusing on building deep connections with the people that you enjoy. If someone is enjoyable for whatever reason, make connections with them, strong connections, and you don't necessarily have to be really good friends with everyone in the department. You can really focus on spending your energy on the people that bring you joy and just minimize the amount of time you spend with people who do not bring you joy. Now, the last thing I'll say about academia is beyond those three things I just mentioned, you're going to be asked to do all sorts of stuff that you do not need to do. That's not required. It does not fulfill any of your goals. You don't have to do any of those things. We can often get a lot of stress from these additional requirements that, are not part of our program and we're not being evaluated on at all. So if it is stressing you out, it's an extra thing that's being added on, just say no to it. It is okay to say no, politely decline, and don't add that extra stress because you want to make sure you have enough room for your personal life, and that is what we're talking about next. Now, the other major category of stressors are things that happen in your life outside of academia. And I think there are three major categories of that. The first one I will talk about is obviously finances. When you are a PhD student, as you probably know if you're in a program now, the salary is very, very low. So that can be really challenging. But what I've seen students do, which is shocking to me, is they leave money on the table. There will be all of these small pots of money that don't seem like they make a difference, but students will let those pots of money go. So for example, there might be $5,000 over the summer to work on a project. And some students will just decide they don't want to do that. Or there might be a small grant for $2,000 or $3,000 to work on developing course material, something like that. Each year, there's several thousands of dollars that you can apply for, like an award, for example, that students just don't apply for. And I've seen this consistently in every single department, that we never have enough applicants. We are trying to give away this money and students just don't apply for it. So it's really strange that the salary is so low, and that can be really hard, and people just can't even bother with these small pots of money. They truly do add up. When I was in my PhD, I applied for everything, and I was able to supplement my base salary with all of these additional funding mechanisms, and that is a really, really smart idea. The other thing is that it also goes on your CV, because oftentimes it's not just like money popped into your salary, there's some title or an award that goes with it, and all of that is really good for your future success. Okay, next let's talk about friends and family. I think that this is the hardest one because when you do a PhD, your friends and family are kind of going through this with you to some degree, because it is so stressful and it's such a long period of time. So I think one of the things you can do to avoid this kind of emotional roller coaster with friends and family is to think about prioritizing their schedule in addition to your schedule. It's going to be this time where you might feel like you need to take over and do everything it takes, right, to get your PhD. But you also have to prioritize what's going on with your family and your friends as well. They can't always be on the back burner. So one thing you can do is you can strategically pick deadlines that are in the downtime for your friends and family. Maybe there's a downtime that your partner has at their work. That would be a good time to schedule a big stressful event for you. So you're kind of alternating, right? You have a stressful event and then maybe they're allowed to have a stressful event that you support them for. So you're kind of alternating who gets the support and priority. Along with that, you want to let people know about your schedule. I think a very stressful thing for friends and family is that they don't know when they can plan things like vacations or events, because you might have a very complicated schedule that has weird ebbs and flows, and it's hard to predict. So being clear about what your schedule is when you have the time for things that are enjoyable, like vacations, communicate that to people because their schedule might not align with yours. And usually people in industry and in other jobs, their schedule is just way different than someone in academia. So trying to sync those up and communicate what your schedule is to your friends and family is key. And the last thing I'll say about friends and family is do what you can when you can. When you have the time, when you're in a lull in your work, to go out of your way to do special things for your friends and family. Let them know that you really appreciate them for going on this journey with you. Even if you are the one going through all of this emotional stress, the people around you will be impacted by it. So don't assume that you need all the support. They need support too, and they need you to demonstrate that you really appreciate all that they're doing to help you be successful during this very stressful time. And the last thing in the personal life categories is hobbies. You need to schedule time for your hobbies every week. There cannot be a time where you just say, I will not do anything that restores me, because you will burn out, okay? I don't know what your hobbies are, but schedule time every week to do something that is restorative to you every single week, even when there is deadlines, okay? It might be tempting to just say, I'm gonna only work on these projects for 2 weeks, doing nothing personal for myself. If you do that, I'm sure you might make it to the deadline, but then you crash and don't do anything for maybe a month, right, to recover. Don't put yourself in a situation where you need to recover. Schedule times for your hobbies, the things that restore you, every single week. I think it goes without saying that you should do all of the things that make you successful in other contexts. Exercise, eating healthy, blah, blah, blah. People tell you all that stuff online, so whatever, do all that stuff too. It's definitely the case in academia that all that stuff works as well, so you can, look at other videos for that. The last piece of advice I'll give you for academia specifically is that you need a safe space where you can complain about the things that are going on to people who have no vested interest in your career, okay? What I mean by this is you don't want to complain to the people in your lab per se, or you don't want to complain to your boss per se. You want to find a group of people who know what's going on in your life, who can commiserate, who can also complain, but that would never do something like, tell your advisor what you're complaining about, or tell, some other faculty what you're complaining about, which can happen, okay? So you need to find a safe space where you can just vent and complain and get it off your chest, and sometimes that is enough. I found what was really helpful for me is that my community has a Slack channel, and that's a really great place to vent and complain, particularly to a small group of people that I trust that can also complain to me. So I hear their complaints, I complain with them, and it's a very cathartic thing that is very useful in academia. I hope this was helpful. I will say that getting a PhD is an emotional roller coaster, but the more you can do to reduce the stress, reduce the up of the roller coaster and the down, you'll make more of a sustainable career. If you like this video, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe for more content on academic success. Take care.